Welcome back to the HYSIA Innovation Summit 2021, the 29th edition. We are ready to begin with our panel discussion on digital, improving public lives. Our panel is set. We're requesting you to settle down as quickly as possible so that we can move on. Right. Let's begin. I'm going to request our panel to join me on stage. I'm going to invite to the stage the moderator for this panel discussion on digital improving lives. Please put your hands together for Mr. Vikas Gupta, MD Talent, Deloitte. Vikas is a human resource professional with more than 2 decades of experience across diverse industries in driving people strategy. In his current role, he helps catalyze growth by leading change and creating avenues to position brand Deloitte internally and in the marketplace. Our panelist for this panel discussion, Dr. Ajit Rangnekar, Director General at Research and Innovation Circle of Hyderabad and partner SVP India. Mr. Ajit Rangnekar is the former Dean of ISB, and he's worked with organizations like PwC in the past. He has been recently appointed as Director of GMAC and is the sole Indian on the GMAC team. And last but not the least, we have on the panel with us Ms. Sailaja Josula, Center Head, Hyderabad, and Global Delivery SBU Practice Head VP, BFSI Digital Operations, Cognizant Technology Solutions. Shailaja is Global Delivery Head at Cognizant's BFSI practice. With over 25 years of experience, she's considered an expert in leading large operations teams, driving transformational initiatives with diverse experience in manufacturing and financial services industries. She's worked with organizations like Thomson Reuters and HSBC in the past. Over to you, Vikas.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for those lovely introductions. I only thought that we should get some love from our audience if they can get back post-lunch. But Murli is my support sitting out here, and so is Kishore and Sridhar, and Srini, and Kiran, and joined by Bernie. So I know I have the right audience available to me. Good afternoon, Hyderabad. Good afternoon, patrons of HYSIA. Thank you for joining. I know it's kind of a tough act right after lunch when HYSIA provides you with that sumptuous lunch with at least a selection of desserts, right? This is what is bound to happen. But thank you for being here on time. Today's conversation is all about digital improving public life. So that's the focus of this conversation. And as you know, I'm joined by 2 prestigious panel members up here. Both of them actually don't need introduction. But that being said, Ajit, who's my guru, has also been my dean. But that being said, in his earlier avatar, he's been a consultant and truly driving some of the changes which we see around at this point in time with respect to digital. So he's been the force behind driving that, pioneer in that particular space. And in today's context with his role, he is helping academia, corporate, and government come together and do something unique in the public space. So Ajit, thank you for joining the panel today. I also have with me Sailaja, somebody who's established 3 big organizations in the city itself. HSBC, she's a veteran out there of all that what you see of 15,000 people of HSBC today across 6 different centers. Thomson Reuters, and now with Cognizant, the employer in the marketplace. So hundreds and hundreds of people across different centers. Sailaja, thank you for joining today, and somebody who's kind of been a force behind driving a lot of digital transformation. I'm not going to go into details of digital here for conversation today. I'm assuming that most of you know what is digital. But whatever you're reading at this point in time with respect to digital, depending on what you're reading, the projections are that in next couple of years or few years, It is ranging from anywhere between $1,500 billion to over $3,500 billion. That's the size of the market which we are talking about. Now, if you think about that size of market and think about the amount of change which will be driven as an outcome of these digital technologies, you can imagine the society we would be living in. Now, I'm sure this morning you've gone through a report with respect to a Forrester analyst who spoke to you a lot about what's changing. And the big message centered around was that it's all going to be for the human experience, right? He also spoke about how you will see a lot of these investments which are coming into digital technologies. There would be not just corporations driving that, but actually individuals forcing that change. And apart from individuals, the big investor in the space would be governments. And why would a government go ahead and invest that money in the digital technologies? It's primarily going to be for public welfare. So think about those aspects of it, of what you've heard this morning and relevance to the topic which we're going to discuss today. So with that as a backdrop, I'll start my conversation today here with this group. And the way I'm going to put this across is that if I think about this change in last, so to say, 20 months after the pandemic started, one thing which fascinated me the most when it gets down to digital technologies is all about social commerce. Have you guys heard about social commerce? How many of you have availed benefit of a social commerce? I know a lot of you use e-commerce. But social commerce?
Yeah.
Anybody? Okay, so social commerce is pretty much, you making use of social media platforms and actually running your business. And think about what a novel way that, I don't need to kind of go ahead and put a whole 9 yards of an organization to make my business work or sell my product. I can use the power of social media, put up my profile, showcase my products, and offer you that offering or the service which I have to offer, and you avail that. So that's what fascinated me when it gets down to think about usage of digital or technology and how is that reaching out to the last person in the society. So with that as a backdrop, let me ask Ajit, you the first question. In last 20 months, what is that one thing with respect to digital which fascinated you the most?
So I think, and unfortunately it got a lot of bad press. But to me, CoWIN was a phenomenal thing. And imagine getting 1.4 billion people onto one platform, making sure that they get their appointments, that it's uploaded, that we can all use it at airports and things like that, reasonably seamlessly in a very short period. I think in terms of public infrastructure, it was an outstanding achievement.
Awesome. Selja, what would be that digital footprint which fascinated you the most in last 20 months?
I think coming from a banking industry, it's how India has become the leading online payments giant, right? I was just noting down some statistics. We have 40 billion digital transactions worth quadrillion Indian rupees going through the online various channels, UPI, IMPS, NACHA, etc. in India. And that is phenomenal compared to some of the most developed countries. And what it has also done is it kind of removed any form of corruption. It generated a lot of transparency. It also ensured very transparent governance, especially where the government is trying to give funds to the below poverty line. And the transactional analysis became very visible for the monitoring authorities to prevent AML. So that's a massive, massive shift. And we see this in our taxes, right? How the entire tax process has become transparent, including the refunds. We see this now when in the form of MyGov portal, where through MeSeva, eSeva, we are able to generate everything, right? It's online, the middlemen are completely removed. I think that's been phenomenal, that the fact that we were at home for 18 months and nothing really got disrupted, I think that's unimaginable even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's been a big shift for Digital India.
Awesome. And since morning, this is my second panel. And I'm fortunate to have another banking professional sitting along with me in the panel. And what I've heard from most of the banking professionals is that, look, our foundations have been shaken up by this UPI. everybody doesn't want to come to banks. They want to kind of transact through UPI. And do we really need such large banks and so on and so forth? So thanks for sharing that, Shailja. So with that, let me transition to Ajit back. And Ajit, since you work a lot in the space of research, and primarily research which is focused on putting up enterprises which are for the social cause, tell us what's your insight? What are you seeing as a pattern emerging in last couple years? I would not say just 20 months, but couple years.
Yeah. So just as a background, we work in 3 areas: food and agriculture, health, and sustainability, right? What I call as the non-sexy part of the business, although health suddenly became sexy thanks to pandemic and became.
Yeah.
But in all of these, if I can take a stand back and generalize, there are 3 kinds of innovations which either are happening or need to happen. The first are what I would call as the quasi-commercial social impact. So whether you take, the kind of things that we are talking about is, ensuring that people get all these sanitizers, this, that, and the other all online. Even, cash delivery, right? I remember we have a lady working with us for the ever since we came back to India. And in the earlier years, she used to sew notes in her undergarments and go. Today, she sends it on her mobile. And that is such a huge social touch that they can speak to their family every single day wherever they are. That's a massive. But those are some. Similarly, e-waste or solar. Those are highly socially useful innovations, but which have a commercial value to it. And therefore, so long by giving subsidies or by some this thing or the other, you can make those work. The second lot is those where the benefits are diffused. Okay? So take, for example, and we were discussing this just now. If you have to clean up Hyderabad and you say we want to start a campaign of Clean Hyderabad, or if you say Hyderabad has more than 300 lakes, which are becoming cesspools of filth and therefore we want to clean them up. Now, if I come to GHMC, first of all, the buyer is the municipal corporations. And if I go to them and say, you know what, I'll clean up these 300 lakes for 300 crores. Those poor guys don't have a hope in hell to know, is 300 crores a good number? Is it too high, too low? What will I get? How will I get? How does this work? Similarly, if I come and say, I'll clean up the air in Hyderabad so that, NO2 levels come down to this thing, you're going to scratch and say, how do I even know that you're doing it? I mean, there'll be a few places where you can, and what are the benefits of it? So there is a large group of social innovations which are getting stalled. Because these don't have the hockey stick returns. These returns at best are like this.
Yep.
Right? Second is, perversely, if at all they start generating return, they start generating returns very early, so no investor wants to invest in it because you're not doing cash burn, which is a perverse thing. The third thing is, no investor wants to invest in it because these are typically buyer is government.
Yeah.
And that is a kiss of death as far as an investor is concerned. And as I said, the social benefits are very difficult to quantify. So many of these are now stuck. And today, I think we need to look at many of these and say, how are we going to change this? And this is a big frustration to those of us who are working in this space.
Yeah.
The last one is perhaps the most important and which in many ways only the government can do, which is the fundamental digital infrastructure underpinning everything. Right? So we did Aadhaar, we are now talking of the health card, etc., etc. Emergency response. By the way, today, C.V. Madhukar, whom I have always admired, launched and talked about Co-Develop, a new NGO. Just today on LinkedIn, he talked about it, which is a new not-for-profit platform to gather together philanthropic money or low-cost money which can be given as grants to these kind of infrastructures to build it. And these can only be built on grants. So truly, not the Baijus of this world, but truly affordable education, truly affordable healthcare for the poor, true infrastructure in our villages, etc., many of these benefits will come, enormous benefits will come to the society through digitization. Public Health Foundation of India here is doing some amazing work with us. But they need funding, and that funding at the moment. So research institutions are doing their part, and I think God bless them. I'm very impressed by our, either in terms of, APIs for import substitution, vaccine production. DRDO came out with that this thing which reduces the extent of hospitalization. CMET is doing things in e-waste, etc. The research institutions are doing that. It is the next step. How do we take it from TRL 3.4 to TRL 9? And who's going to fund that? That is today a big challenge.
You're so right, Ajit. And as I was kind of preparing up for this esteemed panel to have conversation, I was doing my own research to just think about across internet, what are the conversations which are happening about digital and public life and how that's improving? And the three things which you spoke very eloquently about is one, the digital divide affecting children learning. Second, in India, most talked about is the digital payment adoption. And the third one is centered around digital healthcare system.
Yep.
And I think these were the three big topics which are talk of the town when it gets down to India and thinks about the public life. Selja, let me transition to you at this stage. You've been somebody who's kind of not just shaped the organizations which are established organizations up here, but in your current role, you're focused on doing a lot of digital transformation work for corporations. Is that just for corporations? How is that going to change public life?
So I think that's a great question, Vikas. And as I was sitting all through today, that's what I was thinking, right? One hand, we are discussing cutting-edge technologies that would get us into digital 2.0, and the best workforce for digital is in India. How can we take this back to our own country? So one of the things under the outreach, what we have done was actually two things. One was distribution of digital tablets, especially for children who are doing 9th and 10th. And we, at the onset of pandemic, we actually ran a digital skilling program for a number of teachers in Telangana, government schools. There was a discussion earlier today, right? How can teachers cope with remote teaching? How can they keep the attention of the students? Students' attention, as we know, is not easy. All of us can check that. So that is something which has really enabled them. Plus, what we've also done is on those tablets, we have actually barred applications which are not relevant. Right? We all know the impact of bad social media. Whilst there are so many good causes of social media, there are also some unnecessary side effects of social media. We barred all of them. We actually have a monitoring mechanism to see how the tablet is being used, so that if a child is going into sites which we don't want them to, we are able to correct them through the teacher. So we've done that, and we've kind of given these reusable tablets, which are almost going into circulation. And that to me is a very small part. That was one. Second one, as part of the transformation, as we know, the industry moved from desktops to laptops more quickly than ever, especially if I wear my operations hat, BPO. BPO, it was always banned. Oh, you can't work from home. Oh, data privacy. Oh, the desktop will be stuck to a desk in the office where you have to lock your mobiles in a locker outside. All models have been completely shattered. Right? Which obviously we could not, advance from a cybersecurity perspective, but which were still usable assets. So we've started to kind of give them away, again, to schools, etc., to make them digital. And that to me is one way the ITES industry can contribute. But looking back at what we can do, for example, right, we talk about connected devices. We talk about IoT is a big priority for us. We also talk about, how can we use technologies like 3D printing. And going back to what Ajit was telling, how can we use 3D printing for probably our housing-related challenges? How can we use that effectively for prosthetics in healthcare? Can we start giving that out? I was reading news somewhere, there are glasses called eSight 3, which actually help blind people see. Right? Isn't that amazing? That without an operation, we can do that. Can we start looking at technologies like that? Then I was just reading, there's an app in... developed in Bangalore called Timba. right? Docternal is the startup. They actually listen to the sound of the cough and then look at the demographics of the patient, and they're able to do a TB diagnosis without its contactless diagnosis. Now, how much would that benefit, especially in our villages, right? So for me, these are all where I feel the industry should come together with the government. We probably need a bit of a think tank, and obviously with esteemed colleagues like Mr. Ajit here, kind of start putting some of this together. There's so much we can do. The workforce is here, the ideas are here, the incubation is here, right? How can we kind of give it back? And last but not the least, I still feel, whilst we are advanced a lot in healthcare, right? Medivac is not something we have mastered in India. And timely medical evacuation, we know, can save thousands of lives, more so in the rural India. The upside is 6 out of 10 Indians are connected to the internet, which means we are able to ping such a large population today, which was not thinkable a few years ago. How can we start using that with GPS and start using a Medivac kind of a facility so that we can take healthcare to that grassroots level? I think these are some of the things which we have to implement. Invariably we compare infrastructure in India to the infrastructure to some of the most developed countries like a Singapore or a US, right? I don't think there's any dearth of brain power here. But it is we taking these small steps, and as he said, agreeing some funding mechanism and partnership mechanism to make this happen, which in my view will really help us elevate. Because all said and done, we represent, I think, a minority of Indian population. The majority is still the rural population, which is very dependent on agriculture, which is very dependent on the monsoon. And how can we take these technologies, be it IoT, I was reading somewhere, RFIDs, to help them map their entire field and see which part of their field is working well, drones for monitoring the various farms. I think there's so many ideas we can do in that sector. But how many of us are willing to kind of go and do that? How much can we set aside? Maybe that's food for thought, which we can take away from this conference.
Absolutely. You're so right, Selja. And this morning, our participants have heard a Forrester analyst speak about metaverse. And as I think about my own organization's Tech Trend publication, which is kind of an sequel work which they do year on year. For last 13 years, we are publishing it. The 3 technologies which we are talking that would be shaping up the next 10 years. One, which you rightly called out, is quantum technologies. So the way we communicate, the way we kind of compute, the way we kind of go ahead and mine the information would undergo a change. The second you said is centered around the exponential intelligence. So how is kind of different objects talking to each other and so on and so forth. And thirdly, quite rightly, is all about those ambient computing, which is, how can you kind of think about glasses working differently, or how you think about, your homes getting aligned to work and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think there's some exciting pieces of work happening up here.
Given that this is afternoon and, given that we have all companies, and let's put some, fireworks out here and have this thing. I think what Shailaja said is something really, really and very seriously worth pondering about. And I'm going to be provocative here.
Yeah.
I think right now, the software industry is facing, our biggest challenge is talent, right? Everyone is facing exponential growth. So where do I find people is what's missing. And how do I then make the most of this, either in terms of valuation or in terms of profits or in terms of whatever? In that journey, are we forgetting our social purpose? And I think I would like each one of you, please don't answer, I don't want a public answer, but I would like each one of you to go home and ask yourself this question, because I get a dirty feeling that we are likely to. Because look at, use social commerce as a perfect example of this. None of these were actually started for that purpose.
Yeah.
Right? Similarly, metaverse. I mean, it's all ultimately in entertainment and escapism space. Where are the great new changes that affect a common human being? And if we in India don't think, we have the perfect opportunity because we have an understanding of technology, but we also have an awareness of the problems, or we should have an awareness of the problems. And if we don't take the global leadership in solving these problems, as Shaila just said, I think all of us, the minority that you called us, all of us will be failing in our duty.
Yeah. And you're so right, Ajit. As I think about or as I look at some of the trends where people are speaking about this great attrition, great resignation, and things like that, I think one of the big things which is emerging out there is that, hey, the governments will come up with the policies and bring about some changes in the overall compliance aspect of it. Are organizations prepared to even deal with it? And so on and so forth. Yes, so I do see that happening quite a lot. At this point in time, let me quickly check with the audience. Is there anybody who's having any questions up here for the panel? Quick one. Ajit spoke about, some of the responsibilities this audience has as role holders.
So I'll add one more into that pot, Again, taking up your point of minority, the truth is that we large companies are relatively small employers in the overarching theme. It is the gig economy which is now becoming somewhat, but it is the unorganized MSME, etc. And I think we have to again ask ourselves a question. To some extent, SaaS is doing some of this. How are we helping the small companies, the small semi-rural companies to really improve our, so when we talk of public good, the public good doesn't necessarily have to be in only health and education, but it's in making the less, what shall I say, effective underserved part of our economy far more effective and economic. And I think this is going to be a challenge. I mean, it's easy for me. One of the great things I realized when I moved to academia is I can ask all the questions and let somebody else worry about it. But I would like you to, because you're thinking about the right thing. So I'm just fascinated by it.
No, I agree. And in fact, just to add, right, and if we wear the banking hat, at the end of the day, money is at the core of a number of things, right? I think the tick in the box or a great achievement for us is we have now made money easily available through very good channels. We just discussed that. But what about microfinancing? What about that money being extended and the recovery of that without any middlemen? We still know that in the villages, the 1 rupee interest and the 2 rupee interest is very rampant. So much so that people only pay interest. And as we said, one particular crop goes out, then that interest becomes something you pay forever. We were discussing authentication before, right? Authentication going back to land registry, right? Or farms, or property. We know that's a big hassle, especially in India, right? Somebody's property gets seized and it's then a size of power as against anything. How can we start bringing those? And that is then linked with biometrics of that family, etc., which to me will prevent some of the fraud that happens there and some of the land grab that happens there. In the process, what are we trying to do? We're trying to help them retain what they have. We're not even creating wealth. I feel that, on one hand, we are talking of all these technologies which are available to us. And, we are really aspiring to fly high and, limitless imagination. But in terms of bringing it to the grassroots level, there is a delta, right? And that, perhaps this community needs to address it. Whether, we also take up corporate innovation as against corporate social responsibility as one of the things where we promote people to come and start putting ideas and share with government. Maybe that's something food for thought that we have to do. But compared to probably how much people contribute towards public service, say in other countries, our contribution, and this is my personal view, is limited.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think there's a lack of purpose. I don't think there's a lack of intent. All of us want to give back. And the last 18 months of pandemic have actually made us feel even more important that, hey, we need to give it back. We need to give a sense of purpose. But if as organizations, if we adopt this, then it will also give us that sense of purpose, which will help address the great resignation that all of us are dealing about.
Right.
It's just not about making more money to prosperous businesses, but it's also contributing to the society and making a difference to people's lives. So maybe that is something for us to think about. And if we take each area, right? Healthcare in rural India, that's a whole big gamut. Housing, right? Financing, agriculture, right? And then governance. Maybe those are the 5 sectors that I can think of. And then overall education, literacy in the rural India, which is going to really help us, given our population is very young. Maybe those 5, 6 are the sectors we look at and say, okay, what is it that we can drive as innovation, best practice, content development, including your technology development, set up some of those. Maybe that is a thought process that all of us need. Whereas today, I know we do it out of our personal passion and opportunity, and maybe partnering with, I see Mayur here, partnering with the likes of Nirman organization. But to me, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yep. Shalja, you're so
Very well
right.
said.
As I was doing my research on what are the topics which are trending in Telangana at this point in time with respect to digital and public life, education is a big component of it. And the 2 points which kind of highlighted significantly, one was centered around the digital aids for government schools. And the second topic which kind of trended quite a lot was centered around this STEM, preparing people with STEM education. I know both of you are very passionate about that particular area. Ajit, you've worked extensively in that space. So your thoughts on what can be done? Because at the end of the day, great resignation, great attrition is all a problem of a supply and demand. And more work will come in, provided we have the right set of supply of talent available. There's no dearth of demand when it gets down to numbers, which I spoke about as to what's the size of the market. What do you think can be done differently? Any distinct thoughts?
So we've run something as a pilot. So we have actually interacted with the tribal villages in Telangana, and we have worked with economically weaker section kids, worked with them in terms of they clearing their graduation, helping them prepare for AMCAT, which is one of the threshold examinations for ITES industry. And once they've done that, they went through the interview process and they were hired, right? Now the impact of that, right? Each child, girls, boys, they have become role models for their villages. In a village, actually, there was a cutout of the kid placed with her laptop, where the parents are telling, look, she could do it, can't you do it, right? To the gratitude, the work ethics, and the curiosity and the learning, intent that these people bring to work is unimaginable. It's just fantastic. So as an organization, we benefit. But what it also does is it then helps us take there, and all these children that we have hired, they are now doing this for the next gen. Because they're very passionate. If I can come and do this, why can't my friend do this? Why can't my neighbor's child do this? We had to go through a lot of corporate sensitization with the kids to say, hey, this is the behavior and all that. But to me, that's a win-win because the talent, there's no dearth of it. And in today's world of work from home, location also doesn't matter. They can continue to be there. We've got amazing internet connectivity in India. I think we've got one of the cheapest data in the world. All of us know that. So it's all about enabling that individual. And anyway, companies, we ship out kit to them. All the IT companies do. So the person is connected, needs a desk and chair, needs a good environment to kind of work. And suddenly we are looking at anywhere talent. This is almost, the same gig economy that you were talking about. And maybe we need to do this a lot more. And these are the people who are already at the grassroots level. So they naturally want to also contribute to our CSR activities because they want to make a difference. And they in turn can give us ideas and give us connect with the local villagers in terms of where we can truly make an impact. So to me, that is definitely one area in terms of combining education along with a career opportunity. And that is more sustainable also. It's not a one-time intervention. We are giving somebody a lifelong income, which will help that family sustain.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think what stayed with me from that is getting down to the bottom line of jobs. Education is one side of it, but it has to translate into job. And India has also been kind of bad-mouthed about that, hey, we are producing too many people like in carbon copy, right? We are preparing people just for one kind of a thing. And Ajit, your association with the higher education side of the world, anything which you think which can up the game than just kind of preparing people just as a carbon copies up there?
So just before I do that, one of the things, and what you're doing is super better. And afterwards, I would love to see how we can support. But of these children, see, when we grew up, We grew up with our parents who told us the importance of education, health, hygiene, saving, etc. Many of these children just don't have that opportunity to understand what we call as life skills and life these things. And I think that is where sometimes they live so much in the present. Yeah, I know spiritually it's great to live in the present, but they don't therefore understand the importance. So I think we should work with TISSs of this world and bring in some of that also into the education. You know, the other thing is, and I'm not saying this as a criticism of this industry, but what is happening is whether you teach anybody STEM or anything, the only place where the jobs are is the IT industry. So the IT industry to some extent is sucking in talent from other places. It's not the IT industry's fault, it's also partly the fault of the other industry that they must make careers there. So what we are trying to do is to work with the CCMBs of this world and a few to show the exciting careers in these other areas so that at least a few people. See, today what used to happen when I was young that either do engineering or you're going to be a clerk. Now it's either be an IT this thing or you're finished kind of a thing. And I think we need to change a little bit of that. I'm not saying it's our problem, but I'm saying it is a problem that some of us are trying to deal with. Coming to your own this thing. Well, I think, you know, we have already demonstrated to the world, look at every single day, two things are happening. One is some Indian somewhere is becoming a global CEO. And Leena was the last. I'm very proud. I've known her for a long time and I'm proud of that. The second thing is, every few days, and at last I counted, there were at least 6 ISB grads who were unicorns.
Yep.
But that was a week ago, so I don't know whether a 7th and 8th have got added. And the rate at which those unicorns are adding, I have lost track of.
Yeah.
So I think we have begun to show that maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, we were Me Too doers. All of a sudden, and I don't know whether it's pandemic or we are very good at this thing. So first thing I want, I think, you know, and us as an industry to debunk. There is, first of all, nothing wrong. You know, we were a service industry. And man, we did a phenomenal job of it. We became amongst the same thing, we get the same complaint about our pharma, right? You do generics, but thank God for those generics. Because of that, poor people can afford goods. Similarly, when the IT industry started, it was predominantly service, and if we hadn't done that, you people would have been in trouble with Y2K and, you know, 2001. And now, we have to use the latest word, pivoted. And now we are doing, so I think there is nothing really wrong with our education system. The new education policy, the National Education Policy 2020, has identified that we were becoming a little too narrowly focused and we need to now shift towards adaptation. But when I look on the ground, have you in your thing say, man, I have these 10,000 people, but none of them is good? No. I mean, I don't think, you know, look at the number of people and number of companies who are doing still the H-1B visas are. So I think there is a bit of colonial, you know, looking down upon India, especially in the West, and especially with BBCs and CNNs of this world who like to believe that, you know, there's something wrong with. I personally think, and by the way, in business education, again, you know, so many things. When I look back 15 years ago to today, the extent to which education has changed, online has come in, part-time has come in. But I think, again, to get back to digital, in education, we have to rethink. See, what used to happen is, we said, okay, undergrad, 4 years, I'm going to teach you something. Then 2 years in masters, I'm going to teach you something. I'm saying, why? Education must be lifelong now. You want to get into IT industry, you don't. After 2 years, you shift into something else, I should be able to teach you. I want to get into something else, I should get. So I think personalized, just in time, up-to-date education is, I think, the holy grail of higher education, and we have to move towards that.
Awesome point. And Ajit, you gave me a good segue into ask you at this point in time. So you talked about unicorns as a new way of kind of showcasing India and new India. I have questions for both of you. For you, Ajit, as part of your innovation center, do you see people coming up with newer skill sets in this digital world to operate? And to you, Sailaja, my question is, how is organization like yours promoting people within who have entrepreneurial streaks? How does that work? So any thoughts on that
Yes.
aspect of it?
So, the simple answer is yes. We are seeing. I don't think I have seen. In fact, every single day, I see young people coming out with amazing new ideas. Where I then say, okay, where do I find? How do I support them? And there is no shortage of that. But I'm forcing many of them, and in the context of this discussion, I'm saying no. A unicorn is one which touches the life of 10 crores poor people. Don't talk to me about $1 billion. Talk to me about somebody who actually changes in a positive way. And I think when we rethink and rejig our heads around that problem, that we'll see a lot more solutions occurring. As I said, there are problems of how do we get funding, et cetera, for it. But I do want to see people change. There is no shortage, especially in life sciences. We are seeing a humongous number of startups. Person, give it.
So in terms of innovation, absolutely, I think because adapting to pandemic itself triggered that innovation amongst the staff, right? What can we do? How can we engage our people? What are the kind of things that we can do even from an outreach perspective that would touch the society differently without us getting exposed? I know we worked with SCSC and created a whole COVID website at that time, the COVID resources website, which had all the necessary resources during the second wave, right? That was completely done by our staff, the idea, the content development, everything. And it was done, outside their office hours as part of volunteering. Same thing with regard to healthcare life sciences, right? There are teams who are working on pharmacovigilance, which really were able to churn out data very quickly that helped us look at what are the negative events or what are the positive events coming out from some of the things. Is that enough? In my view, no, right? And goes back to the discussion we are trying to have here. I also want to bring out slightly, digressing, right? Sitting here, I am a minority within a minority, right? And I will call that out. And the same thing reflects in the innovation also. How many apps are catering to the rural women? And this is where it's either hygiene or female health or even female financing, right? I know we have, we are promoting, we have VHub, we are promoting women entrepreneurs, etc. But is that, again, something that we need to emphasize? Because I was reflecting, and this is a simple conversation, right? All of us I know interact with maids at our place. Their problems, what they were 10 years ago, are similar this year, today also. They haven't changed. And in our industry, we talk of diversity, women empowerment, equality, fantastic stuff. Try talking that to my maid. She thinks I'm nuts, right? Because that acceptance is not there. That awareness is not there. And we were talking, I think there was a previous conversation where, somebody said text to speech, how useful it would be in a rural India, right? In an agricultural kind of a setup. I think this is one of the topics which requires that, because it is, to me, a cultural transformation that is required in the country for us to have 50% of the workforce contribute towards the country's economy. Whereas today, I think I see a big gap. Huge fan of Ms. Falguni Nair for Nykaa. But again, what's the market that caters to, right? It's not, towards the rural women empowerment. Again, I think those are some of the conversations we need to look at. And even as organizations, are we doing enough in the innovation space? Honest answer, no. We encourage them. But to be honest, with work from home and then children at home and then elder care at home and vexed with work from home, I think those ideas are limited.
So you heard our panel speak about a plethora of things in a very, very succinct manner. Sailaja very rightly put across those 6 key identified areas: health, education, finance, and including all of those. And then Ajit spoke about the talent and how's talent kind of shaping up to achieve that objective up there. One of the trends which kind of closes all of this is all about the digital identity. Going back to Sailaja's example of a maid not having the same experience as we, which are kind of an exclusive class in achieving that, is a very, very different thing. So as leaders in the IT industry, I think there is an opportunity for all of you to start thinking about how would, if there is an opportunity for you to create the digital identity of individuals who are part of our country today, or even globally, how would you leverage that and how would you shape your businesses going forward? Second, going back to Ajit's point on pride of India, one of the big topics trending on internet was Vietnam's Digital Day. I know we've gone to the Yoga Day and we have so many other days attached to our country. I think it's an opportunity for us, if we are 50% of the workforce for technology sitting in India, why can't we go ahead and create that digital day for India, where we start to think about some of these things. So those are the two things which I would like to leave you as a thought for you to take this forward from here on. I do see in hand quickly, so ma'am, quickly ask your question before we close.
The gentleman behind you is getting you, okay.
Right. So my question actually is, from morning we've been having discussions over having the dearth of talent and skilled people to be employed. But then don't you think the whole system is built that way, that we're bringing more exclusivity in the system by, in the form of education that is there and in the form of the employment that is happening. We're bringing more and more exclusivity and there are more and more smaller groups being built. So that is one thing that I want to ask your opinion on. And the other thing is the reforms that are happening are actually going against the idea of uniformity. Now you see the contractual laws that are coming in place by the government, the reforms are actually going backwards and not forward-looking. This is what I think. What's your opinion on this? Thank you.
So I think, look, you cannot start with a poor country and say that in a period of 5 or 10 years, I want 100% uniformity of this thing. This is like not even half full. It's like 3/4 full or 1/4 empty or maybe 10% empty or 20% empty. When I look at how exclusive education was when I studied, to how inclusive it is in your time and how more inclusive it is today, I think this country has come humongously. Already Shailaja was talking about going not to Vikarabad but to the poor in wherever it is. I think the spread that is already happening, and the nice thing it's a mix of both government wanting thing but industry realizing, and talent shortage is one of the greatest motivators for us to innovate. So I think, there is a humongous, of course, if you don't study or somebody doesn't, there will be a divide, but that divide is shrinking. And yes, we may want that divide to vanish quickly. And in Thomson Reuters, you people did a lot with people with disabilities, and I was partly associated with some of them. So yes, there are many pockets, and the worst affected pocket, we never talk about it, transgenders, who are by far the worst affected in our society. But while we agree and there should be, the rate at which that gap is shrinking, I think is pretty, that was one. I think I'm not competent really to talk about government policies or whatever. Very many times we look at policies from our selfish perspective. I don't think any government, and I'm not being political one way or the other, really chooses to make policies which are wrong. Right? To some extent, what inputs we give and what's going to be fascinating is to see the data policy now coming up. And I bet you that there'll be about 50 people, depending on how badly I am hurt versus how badly the country is hurt, we will all talk about. But I was a big fan, and I continue to be a big fan of the farm policy, because I thought very strongly that for once, we had a policy in which all political parties had earlier agreed to. And yet it failed, right? So I can't really speak on policies anymore. I've given up on that.
I think just one element I want to add, and I know conscious of time, right? There is technical education and then there is management education, right? And in my view, we are so focused on the technical education, right? And somewhere the soft skills are lost, or there is not much of an opportunity to impart those soft skills. And that was a conversation, Mr. Ajit was also mentioning, that who is teaching them life skills? Who is talking about finances? Who is talking about, communication, networking, influencing, all those skills which are very important to survive in a corporate world. So maybe that is the shift. And this is where, again, I would say, we probably should partner with the academia. I know there are a few from academia here. We were having another discussion earlier this week. Can we have this industry academia kind of a participation? And by the way, I did my chemical engineering a while ago, and I realized it was a while ago when I was addressing a batch of freshers last month. But at that time, we used to actually have industry academia kind of an interaction where we used to visit the factories, or we used to have industrialists visit us and tell us how the various phenomena that we are using are actually applied in the factory environment, which is great. Where are we doing it in the ITES? It's not just about producing coders, for want of a better word, and probably there's a perception in India there are many coders also, right, which we have to go and address, right? But it's about giving all these skills. Do we teach them about the various verticals, like a healthcare vertical or a BFS vertical, and how ITES is very important in that vertical? And maybe that is some thought that we need to put together along with the academia to kind of shape that. At the end of the day, children will learn whatever they are taught. So I think the onus is more on us, not on the kids.
All right. One more question. If you're cautious of time, if
Okay, this is the last question
okay,
probably
all
we'll
right.
take.
Go ahead, gentlemen.
Sir, namaste all of you, and I really appreciate Arul sir and other team of ICIA and associates here. My name is Ram Maruri. I'm from Lead India Foundation, mentored by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam ji. We have a great platform which is now in place to take forward this all vision, whatever Ajit ji, Shailaja ji, and everyone talked about. And we have about 5 pillars: affordable quality healthcare, education, environment, agriculture, then peace and harmony also added to that as a derivative, and then youth empowerment, women empowerment, and economic employment and generation. These areas we are now thinking to come up with a big social impact projects with multi-billion-dollar investment approach. I request and invite ICIA and other great leaders like you to join hands. Together, definitely we are going to impact further. That is what the solution is required, not the problems talked about. So the solution is very much out there. J.A. Chaudhary Garu is now the chair of our Women Empowerment Track, and Shailaja ji, I think you can definitely count on women empowerment with his leadership. And we are also doing on the rural development side. Director General of NIRD, he is now joined as the chairman of our rural development track. Innovation and entrepreneurship track, Varadarajan Krishna from Bengaluru, who is a co-founder of 100 Open Startups. These many great people are joining the Lead India Foundation. I request everyone here, let us join hands, including ICIA, and who has brought us here. I really congratulate once again, and invite all of you to join us, and let us make an impact together. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that insight on Lead India initiative. Let's support Lead India.
Thank
All
you.
right, panel, that's the time we had. Thank you so much for your insightful thoughts on public life. And I'm sure with digital identities taking shape, we have a bright future ahead of us, and India is going to be leading that effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Requesting the panel to hold on for a couple of minutes more. Thank you so much for joining us today and shining the spotlight on the human side of enterprise. I'm going to invite Mr. Murli Bolu to the stage. Mr. Murli is the CEO of ZenQ and has held the position of President ICIA in the past. Request you to felicitate our moderator of this panel discussion, Mr. Vikas Gupta, MD Talent, Deloitte. Yeah. Okay, we're going with the ladies first. So this one's for Shailaja ma'am. And the next, Dr. Ajit Rangnikar. And our memento of appreciation to Mr. Vikas Gupta. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today and to Mr. Vikas for leading us.